The eclipse was a jovial place. If your idea of jovial involved malfunctioning oxygen regulators, a crew with a collective hangover, and a slowly dying star as the main attraction. Captain Juno Estrada surveyed her domain with what could generously be called a grimace. You know, she said, eyeing the flickering lights overhead, if I wanted this much excitement, I'd have stayed on Earth and joined the circus. Hexel Voss, the space station's head engineer, snorted from behind a mess of wires and circuits. Pretty sure circuses have better benefits and less radiation. He flicked a switch and something sparked ominously. Is that supposed to happen? Juno asked, peering closer. Hexel shrugged, sure, if you're a fan of fireworks in space. He straightened up, wiping his hands on his already filthy overalls. The station's got character, all right, like a drunken uncle who won't stop telling you the same war story. Juno glanced at the dying star outside. Well, let's hope Uncle Charlie's story doesn't end with us imploding. Imploding or exploding? Hexel asked with a grin. I like to know how I'm gonna die. Surprise me, Juno replied dryly. Just then Sirius, the station's sentient AI, chimed in with the kind of cheer reserved for used car salesmen. Captain Estrada, I regret to inform you that an energy surge has been detected. Probability of something going terribly wrong, 98%. Perfect, Juno said, throwing her hands up. And here I thought today was gonna be dull. Hexel rolled his eyes. You know, Sirius, maybe you could try sugarcoating things for once. I attempted that once, Sirius replied. The crew did not appreciate my rendition of Don't Worry, Be Happy. Because you played it on a loop for 6 hours, Juno muttered. Details, Sirius said breezily. Anyway, the surge seems to be originating from the star itself. Preliminary analysis suggests a time rift. Juno raised an eyebrow. A time rift? Really? Just what we need, time travelers popping out for a little vacation. Hexel snorted. Hey, at least they wouldn't be any later than us, right? Very funny, Juno said, sarcasm dripping like oil from a busted engine. Sirius, what do we know about this rift? Only that it's not supposed to exist, the AI replied, which I believe is the understatement of the millennium. Great, Juno sighed. Add it to the list of things not supposed to exist but do anyway, right up there with zero-calorie space beer. Captain, Sirius interjected, I suggest caution. The rift could be a potential hazard. You don't say, Juno replied. All right, Hexel, let's get the team together. We need to figure out how to deal with a time rift before it decides we're the main course. You know, Hexel said as he gathered his tools, when I signed up for this gig, I was promised adventure. Not a death trap with a front row seat to a dying star. Don't worry, Juno said, slapping him on the back. You'll get your adventure, whether you like it or not. The crew of the Eclipse gathered in the common area, a space that smelled vaguely of burnt toast and desperation. Juno stood at the front, her expression a mix of determination and barely concealed dread. All right, folks, listen up, she called, capturing the attention of the ragtag group. We've got a situation on our hands. A time rift has appeared near the star, and it's up to us to make sure it doesn't turn into a cosmic blender. But what now? Asked a young officer who looked like he hadn't slept since the last solar flare. A cosmic blender, Juno repeated. You know, where things go in and come out as something you don't even recognize. Like my ex-wife's cooking, Hexel muttered. Juno ignored the snickers from the crew. Hexel, you and Sirius will be heading up the analysis. See what you can make of it. The rest of you, make sure the station stays together. I'd rather not explain to HQ why we ended up as space debris. Captain, Sirius chimed in. I recommend we deploy a probe to gather data on the rift. Good idea, Juno nodded. Let's make sure this isn't just some cosmic hiccup. Cosmic hiccup, right, Hexel said, shaking his head as he headed towards the control center. Just another day on the Eclipse. As Hexel and Sirius prepared the probe for launch, Juno watched from the observation deck. The star outside was a hulking, angry ball of fire, its light flickering like a dying bulb. You ever think about why we're here, Juno? Hexel asked as he tinkered with the probe's sensors. Juno snorted. Existential crisis now, Voss. Timing's impeccable. Not like that, Hexel said, rolling his eyes. Just, we're floating around a dying star with a time rift. It's like the universe is daring us to screw up. Hexel, Juno said, a smirk playing on her lips. I think the universe just has a sick sense of humor. Probe's ready, Hexel announced. Let's see what secrets this rift's hiding. Let's hope they're the kind of secrets that don't come with a death sentence, Juno replied. As the probe shot towards the rift, the crew watched in silence. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Everyone was thinking the same thing. What fresh hell was about to be unleashed? Sirius's voice broke the silence. Preliminary data incoming. Analyzing, Juno leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the screen displaying the probe's feed. The rift was a swirling mass of chaos, colors and shadows twisting in a dance that defied logic. Looks like a bad acid trip, Hexel muttered. You've had a few, I take it, Juno quipped. Before Hexel could retort, Sirius spoke again, this time with a hint of urgency. Captain, readings suggest the rift is expanding. Expanding, Juno said, her voice a mix of disbelief and exasperation. Well, that's just perfect. Anyone got any aspirin? Hexel glanced at the data. If this thing keeps growing, we're in trouble. No kidding, Juno said. All right, we need options. Hexel, serious, figure out how to stabilize it or close it. We've got enough problems without adding sucked into a time rift to the list. I'll see what I can do, Hexel said, already lost in the data. And maybe bring a bucket, Juno added, not entirely joking, in case the universe decides to vomit on us. The crew of the Eclipse got to work, each person grappling with the reality of their predicament. They were at the mercy of a universe that seemed to take sadistic pleasure in throwing curveballs, but if there was one thing humans were good at, it was surviving against the odds, even if those odds involved a time rift and a dying star. Juno watched her crew scramble, a sense of pride mixing with the gnawing dread in her gut. We're gonna get through this, she muttered to herself. Somehow, Captain Sirius's voice cut through her thoughts. I've found something, an anomaly within the rift. It's a message. Juno frowned. A message from who? Sirius hesitated. From ourselves, Captain, from the future. For a moment, the universe fell silent. Then Juno laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be? Hexel looked up, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity on his face. What does it say? Juno leaned forward, her heart pounding. Play it, Sirius. As the message crackled to life, the crew listened, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock. Attention Eclipse crew, the voice said, eerily familiar. This is Captain Juno Estrada from 10 years in the future. If you're hearing this, then the rift has opened and you're in grave danger. Juno's eyes widened, her mind racing. Well shit, she muttered. Guess we're all screwed then. The message continued, detailing a future where the rift had consumed the Eclipse and its crew, leaving nothing but darkness in its wake. The key to survival lies in the heart of the star, future Juno's voice said. Find the core, harness its power, and you might just stand a chance. As the message ended, silence fell over the room once more. Find the core of a dying star, Hexel said slowly. No problem, all in a day's work, right? Yeah, Juno said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Just another Tuesday on the Eclipse. Sirius's voice broke the tension, a rare hint of concern in its tone. Captain, what are your orders? Juno took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. We do what humans do best, she said. We fight like hell to survive. Hexel prepped the team. We're going star diving. As the crew sprang into action, Juno couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. They were about to dive into a star to save their future selves from an intergalactic blender. Just another day in the life of the Eclipse crew, and if they survived, well, that would be one hell of a story. Let's go save our asses, Juno said, her grin as fierce and unyielding as the dying star outside. And maybe the universe while we're at it. The Eclipse was a place where sanity came to die, a rotating metal coffin orbiting a dying star, now graced with a time rift that had all the charm of a black hole's holiday brochure. Captain Juno Estrada, rubbing her temples as if trying to massage away the impending migraine, watched the swirling chaos on the observation screens, waiting for the next disaster to unfold like a poorly written sitcom. Captain, Sirius piped up in that gratingly chipper voice of his, the rift is expanding, and I don't mean metaphorically. Of course it is, Juno muttered, her patience thinner than the station's recycled air. And here I thought things might actually be looking up. Hexel Voss appeared beside her, an expression that said he'd rather be anywhere else but there. So, Captain, any bright ideas, or are we winging it like last time? Before Juno could answer, the station shuddered as if the universe had decided to give it a good existential shake. Alarms wailed, echoing a serenade of doom through the corridors. But this time, it wasn't just the station throwing a tantrum. Figures were materializing out of thin air, stepping out of the rift like they'd just been evicted from a cosmic portal party. There were 5 of them, each dressed in garb from different eras of humanity's gloriously violent history. A Roman centurion, his armor gleaming with an unnecessary amount of bravado, a Viking with a beard that could double as a small animal sanctuary, a samurai looking like he'd taken a wrong turn on his way to a duel, a medieval knight, more metal than man, and a Wild West gunslinger, twirling his revolver like he had something to prove. Well, Hexel remarked dryly, looks like we've got ourselves a historical reenactment society. Bet they've got a killer membership fee. Juno pinched the bridge of her nose. Sirius, please tell me this isn't permanent. Unfortunately, Captain, they are quite real and from initial scans, quite alive. Also, they appear to be confused. Probability of hostilities, 98%. Always the optimist, Juno sighed. The Roman centurion took a step forward, gesturing imperiously with his gladius as if expecting immediate obedience. His eyes, filled with the kind of arrogance only 2,000 years could ferment, surveyed the room with disdain. I am Marcus Decimus of the 10th Legion, he declared, voice booming. Who dares imprison a Roman soldier? Beside him, the Viking chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. Imprisoned, we're in Valhalla, friend. Long have I awaited the halls of the gods. The samurai remained silent, his hand resting lightly on his katana, poised like a coiled spring. He was taking the whole strong, silent type to a professional level. Valhalla, my ass, the gunslinger drawled, spitting on the floor. This here looks more like some god-forsaken purgatory, and I'm pretty sure I was winning that poker game. Juno exchanged a glance with Hexel. Well, they seem friendly, Hexel snorted. Yeah, like a pack of rabid dogs. What now? Now, Juno said, trying not to sound as hopeless as she felt. Now we try not to get killed. The knight, still in his tin can of an armor, stepped forward, the clanking of metal announcing his every move. By the grace of God, I demand to know where I stand. You're on a space station orbiting a star that's about to eat us all for breakfast, Juno said, folding her arms. Welcome to the eclipse. Space. The Centurion's scowl deepened. Witchcraft? No, just really advanced science, Juno replied, though sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. The Viking, eyes twinkling with mischief, stepped closer, towering over Juno like a particularly hairy mountain. And who leads this band of warriors? I do, Juno said, meeting his gaze without flinching. Captain Juno Estrella, Captain A, he grinned, revealing teeth that could use a few centuries of modern dentistry, a fitting title for a shield maiden. The samurai, who had been observing with the intensity of a hawk eyeing a particularly juicy mouse, finally spoke. Why have you brought us here, Captain? Juno shrugged with a nonchalance she didn't feel. I didn't. The universe just has a twisted sense of humor. But since you're here, maybe you can help us not die. The gunslinger tipped his hat back, revealing a face weathered by more than just sun. And what's in it for us? Seems like a hell of a leap just to be good Samaritans. Hexel, who had been fiddling with his toolkit like it held the secrets of the universe, spoke up. Well, if you don't help, we'll all end up as space popsicles. So there's that, space popsicles. The Centurion's voice was a blend of confusion and disdain. Speak plainly, barbarian. It means we're screwed, Juno interjected, cutting through Hexel's impending sarcasm. Unless we figure out how to shut that rift and stabilize this station, we're all going to be cosmic dust. The Viking scratched his beard thoughtfully. A worthy challenge, then. The knight, who had been silent until now, clanged a fist to his chest. Then let us fight as brothers. Or sisters, Juno added, the corners of her mouth quirking up despite herself. Brothers and sisters, the knight corrected, as if Juno's addition was a divine revelation. Great, Hexel said, rolling his eyes. Now that the band's back together, let's focus on not dying. With the motley crew of historical warriors reluctantly assembled and somewhat pacified, Juno turned her attention back to Sirius. Sirius, can you analyze any changes in the rift since their arrival? Of course, Captain, the AI replied, its usual chipper veneer now tinged with a hint of caution. The rift's expansion has momentarily stabilized, likely due to the energy signatures of the new arrivals. Energy signatures, Juno echoed. So, bringing these guys in somehow. Balanced it, temporarily, yes. But without a proper fix, it's only a matter of time before it resumes its growth. Well, that's comforting, Hexel muttered, glancing at the warriors who were now surveying their surroundings with a mix of apprehension and awe. Juno squared her shoulders, turning to face her crew and their new, albeit reluctant, allies. All right, folks, here's the plan. We need to stabilize that rift, and quickly. Hexel, work with Sirius to figure out the technical side. I'll coordinate with our new friends here to keep the station in one piece. The Roman centurion Marcus stepped forward, eyes narrowing. And what task would you assign a Roman soldier, Captain? Juno considered her options. We need to secure the station and make sure none of this rift nonsense disrupts our systems. Think you can manage that? Romans are known for their discipline and order, he replied, straightening imperiously. Consider it done. The Viking grinned, clapping Marcus on the back with enough force to rattle his armor. And we shall stand by your side, Roman. Jolly cooperation, Hexel muttered under his breath, earning himself a withering glare from Juno. Hexel, less sarcasm, more fixing, she snapped, though there was no real heat in her voice. As the engineer moved off, muttering to himself about the odds of success, Juno returned her focus to the rest of the group. All right, let's get to work. The sooner we stabilize the situation, the sooner we can figure out how to get you all back to your own times. The gunslinger, who had been observing the proceedings with a skeptical eye, finally spoke up. And what if time ain't waiting for us? Juno offered a grim smile. Then we improvise. With that, she turned her attention to the task at hand, leaving the crew and their eclectic new allies to scramble into action. Each warrior, now more or less convinced of the direness of their situation, began working with the Eclipse's crew. They moved through the station, a historical parade that would have been laughable if the stakes weren't so damn high. Juno paired each historical figure with a member of her crew, hoping that some tangible task might keep them from causing any more chaos. Marcus, you take the engineering deck, Juno instructed, pointing him toward the bowels of the station where Hexel was already knee-deep in wires and curses. Hexel could use an extra pair of hands, a task worthy of a Roman, Marcus said, and with a final imperious nod, he strode off. The Viking, whose name turned out to be Bjorn, found himself paired with the burliest of the station's crew. Just don't break anything, Juno warned, watching as the two seemed to bond over who could lift the heaviest piece of equipment. And I thought the hairy one was the crew's mascot, Hexel quipped over the comms. Keep it up, Voss, and I'll make you the mascot, Juno shot back, earning a chuckle from the samurai who had silently materialized beside her. The samurai Hiroshi seemed to take the task of patrolling the corridors as a personal mission, his katana unsheathed and gleaming under the station's artificial lights. I will ensure that no harm comes to your crew, Captain, he assured her with a bow. Considering what we're up against, I'll take all the help I can get, Juno admitted, watching as he moved with a grace that belied the chaos around them. The knight, introduced as Sir Reginald, because of course he was, had taken it upon himself to organize a defensive perimeter around the command deck, barking orders with the kind of authority only someone wearing 50 pounds of armor could muster. Let no foul creature breach these walls, he declared, brandishing his sword with the enthusiasm of a man who'd just found his calling. Juno couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. Here she was, captain of a space station hurtling toward disaster, aided by warriors pulled from the pages of history. It was either the universe's cruelest joke or the most bizarre stroke of luck she'd ever experienced. Sirius, she called, turning her attention back to the AI. Any progress on the rift? Analysis continues, Captain, Sirius replied, its tone businesslike and efficient. However, I believe I may have a lead on stabilizing the rift's energy fluctuations. Good, Juno said, breathing a silent sigh of relief. Keep at it, as the crew and their historical counterparts continued their efforts to get the station back in working order. Juno allowed herself a moment to reflect. They had a long way to go before they could claim victory, but for now, they were holding their own. And in the grand scheme of things, against all odds, that was something. Okay, this is officially the weirdest day of my life, Juno muttered, watching a Roman centurion and a Viking debate the virtues of various bladed weapons. Marcus was extolling the engineering marvel of the gladius, while Bjorn countered with the raw, brutal efficiency of an axe. Strange allies for strange times, Captain, Sirius chimed in over the station's intercom, ever the bearer of unwanted cheerfulness. Strange is an understatement, Sirius, Juno replied, shaking her head. I half expect a velociraptor to waltz in next. Statistically unlikely, Captain, but I wouldn't rule it out. Thanks, I feel so much better now. Meanwhile, Hexel was busy elbow-deep in the station's guts, grumbling as he coaxed the finicky oxygen regulators into cooperating. Remind me again why I'm the only one who knows how to fix anything around here. Because you're the one dumb enough to volunteer, Juno shot back, flipping through a cracked datapad that was more temperamental than useful. True, Hexel conceded, but if I get us all killed, at least I won't have to listen to the History Channel rejects arguing over kitchen utensils. That's the spirit. As Hexel continued to tinker, Juno turned her attention to Hiroshi, who was eyeing an exposed bundle of wires with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for snakes and tax collectors. Hiroshi, Juno called, beckoning him over. Mind helping Hexel? He could use a hand that knows the business end of a blade. Hiroshi nodded, sheathing his katana with a flourish that screamed theatrical flair. I will assist, he said, as if offering his help was akin to bestowing a great honor. Just don't stab anything important, Hexel added without looking up. That includes me. While they worked, Juno tried to marshal her ragtag crew into something resembling a coherent defense plan. The eclipse was falling apart faster than her patience, and they couldn't afford any more surprises, at least not the literal kind. All right, listen up, Juno announced, gathering the warriors. The good news is Sirius thinks it might have a lead on how to stabilize the rift. And the bad news, the gunslinger drawled, leaning against a bulkhead with the kind of casual insolence only cowboys and cats manage to pull off. The bad news is, we might not live long enough to fix it, Juno said, deadpan. Predictably, this elicited a round of murmured discontent. Fear not, fair captain, Sir Reginald boomed, somehow managing to sound reassuring and pompous at the same time. We are warriors of valor and honor. We shall face this challenge with courage. Great, Juno said dryly, because courage is exactly what you need when you're trying to outsmart a time rift and a dying star. Hexel snorted from his corner, still elbow-deep in station entrails. Nothing like a good pep talk before we all fry. Juno cast a sidelong glance at Hexel. You're really bringing the room down, you know that. Just being realistic, Hexel replied, wiping grease from his hands onto a rag that had seen better days and probably centuries. Realistic, he says, Bjorn grumbled, casting a skeptical eye over the station's flickering lights. More like pessimistic. Potato, potato, Hexel shrugged. Juno sighed, running a hand through her hair. All right, enough. Let's focus on not becoming Star Chow. Serious update. The rift is continuing to exhibit erratic energy fluctuations, Sirius reported, its voice a chipper counterpoint to the dire news. However, there's a pattern emerging in its behavior, and this pattern means. What exactly? Juno asked, feeling the edges of her patience fraying like an old sweater. If my calculations are correct, and they usually are, I believe introducing a stable energy source into the rift's epicenter might counteract the instabilities, Sirius replied. Sounds like a great way to blow us all to hell, Hexel quipped, earning himself a glare from Juno. It's our best shot, Juno said. And unless one of you has a better idea, we're going with it. A moment of silence followed as the assembled warriors exchanged glances, each weighing the odds of survival against the grim alternatives. Finally, Marcus spoke up, his voice firm and resolute. Romans do not shy from danger. We shall see this through. Bjorn grunted in agreement, his eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and impending violence. A glorious battle with a worthy foe, and when we might actually win, the gunslinger added, tipping his hat toward Juno. Long odds are still better than no odds. Then it's settled, Juno said, a thread of cautious optimism threading its way into her voice. Let's get to work, as they set about the task of preparing the energy stabilization device, cobbled together from bits of the station that Hexel was fairly sure wouldn't kill them all. Juno felt the weight of the situation pressing down like a cosmic anvil. Captain, Sirius piped up, a word of caution. Sirius, I live for your cautionary tales, Juno replied, sarcasm dripping from her words. There is a 98% probability that introducing an energy source at this magnitude may attract unwanted attention, Sirius continued, unperturbed. Unwanted attention from what, exactly? Juno asked, already dreading the answer. Unknown entities residing within or around the rift, Sirius replied, as if discussing the weather. Their nature is currently unspecified, but they appear to be drawn to energy spikes. Fantastic, Juno muttered. Another thing to worry about. Captain, it was Hexel, waving her over to the control panel where Hiroshi was staring intently at a display, his expression unreadable. I think we're ready to give this a shot. Juno nodded, her mind racing. All right, everyone in position. This is going to be tricky. Tricky's my middle name, Hexel quipped, earning a snort of laughter from the gunslinger. Let's hope we all live long enough to see you change it, Juno replied, moving to her station and scanning the readouts with a practiced eye. Initiating energy transfer in 3, 2, 1, Hexel counted down, his voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air like a live wire. The station trembled as the device powered up, a low hum building to a throaty roar as it began to siphon energy from the Eclipse's core. As the rift's energy began to stabilize, the lights flickered and dimmed, plunging the station into an eerie half-light. Come on, Juno muttered under her breath, willing the device to hold steady. Just a little longer. For a moment, the rift seemed to calm, its chaotic energies swirling into a stable, pulsing rhythm. Relief washed over Juno like a wave, only to crash against the rocks of reality as alarms began to blare, shrill and insistent. Sirius, report, Juno barked, her heart racing. Rift stability achieved, Sirius replied, its voice calm despite the chaos. However, sensors are detecting multiple entities inbound. Estimated time of arrival, 2 minutes. Of course they are, Juno said, her sarcasm masking a growing sense of dread. All right, everyone, buckle up. We're about to have company. As they scrambled to prepare for the impending arrivals, Juno couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of gratitude for her unlikely allies. If they were going to face whatever horrors the rift had in store, at least they wouldn't be doing it alone. All right, folks, Juno called, rallying her crew and the warriors into a makeshift defensive line. We've got incoming. Brace yourselves. The knight, Sir Reginald, took up position at the front, his armor gleaming in the dim light. We shall hold this line. With what? Sheer stubbornness, Hexel muttered, but he joined the line, a makeshift weapon in hand. Stubbornness and a few good blaster rifles, the gunslinger added, checking his weapon with a practiced hand. Ain't exactly a fair fight, but when is it ever? As the countdown ticked closer to 0, Juno allowed herself a final moment of calm, a quiet before the storm. The eclipse was creaking and groaning around them, the stars' instability magnifying every sound into a cacophonous symphony of impending doom. Remember, Juno said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife, we're not just fighting for our lives. We're fighting for a chance to see what tomorrow might bring. And if tomorrow doesn't come, Bjorn asked, his voice a low rumble. Then we make damn sure today counts, Juno replied. In the silence that followed, the air crackled with anticipation, a taut wire stretched to its breaking point. The station shuddered as the first of the entities breached the rift, an amorphous shape twisting and roiling like a nightmare-given form. Contact, Sirius announced, its voice ringing with urgency. All hands prepare for engagement, and then the room erupted into chaos. Blaster fire lit up the darkened corridors, the smell of ozone thick in the air as the crew and their makeshift allies fought back against the encroaching darkness. Juno swung into action, her movements precise and calculated, adrenaline sharpening her senses to a razor's edge. With each second that ticked by, it became increasingly clear that this battle was as much about survival as it was about defiance. Ducking behind a console, Juno fired off a quick burst, her shot striking true and buying her a moment to breathe. Nearby, Marcus and Bjorn fought side by side, their ancient weapons a stark contrast to the futuristic setting. "Push them back," Reginald bellowed, his voice a rallying cry amidst the chaos. As the battle raged around her, Juno felt a grim sort of satisfaction. They might not win, hell, they probably wouldn't, but they wouldn't go down without a fight. And in a universe that rarely offered second chances, that was enough, for now at least. "Keep it up, people," Juno shouted, her words lost in the cacophony. "We're not done yet," and so they fought, a ragtag band of misfits and warriors standing against the dark, united by the simple, stubborn refusal to surrender. In the end, it was the closest thing to hope they had. The station's corridors echoed with the chaos of battle, the air filled with the acrid scent of ozone and the metallic tang of fear. The lights flickered like a dying star's last gasp, casting erratic shadows over the warriors and crew locked in desperate combat against the entities pouring through the rift. Juno ducked behind a bulkhead, blaster in hand, firing off shots that sizzled against the oncoming horrors. "Anyone got a plan that doesn't involve us getting torn to shreds?" she shouted over the cacophony. Hexel, crouched beside her, grinned like a man with nothing left to lose. "I've got one, run like hell. Great plan. Only, we're in space." Juno rolled her eyes, popping up to take another shot. "Running's a bit limited." Nearby, Marcus swung his gladius with the kind of enthusiasm only a Roman with a point to prove could muster. "Stand your ground," he roared, as if sheer volume could turn the tide. "For glory and honor." "Yes, because honor's gonna save our asses," Hexel muttered, fiddling with a panel that sparked ominously. "If I can reroute power from life support." "Hold on," Juno interrupted, blinking. "You want to kill us faster?" Hexel shrugged, not looking up. "Just a little. Enough to juice up the defense grid." Juno considered this, weighing the options like a scale that was already tipped in favor of doom. "Fine, but if we all start choking, I'm haunting you." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Hexel replied, a grim smile tugging at his lips as he worked. Sir Reginald, standing tall in his dented armor, swung his sword in wide arcs, pushing back the entities with medieval bravado. "We must hold the line, my friends," he declared, "for the sake of all that is good and—" "Look, can we skip the speeches?" Juno cut in. "We're a little busy trying not to be eaten." Amidst the chaos, a new figure emerged from the rift, towering and fierce, with eyes like burning coals. Ragnar Bloodaxe, a name as subtle as a brick, stepped onto the station's deck. He looked like he'd traded his last brain cell for muscles and a clear disdain for personal hygiene. "Ah, just what we need," Juno muttered, a Viking with an inferiority complex. Ragnar surveyed the scene with the air of a man sizing up a particularly unruly pig before slaughter. "Surrender, and I may spare your lives," he bellowed, voice booming like thunder off the bulkheads. "Tempting," Juno called back, sarcasm sharp enough to cut, "but we're kinda in the middle of something." Ragnar's grin was a feral thing, all teeth and menace. "You fight well, but your time is over. This station will be ours." "Yeah, well, possession's 9/10 of the law," Hexel muttered, yanking a wire free and causing the station to shudder beneath them. "There, that ought to do it." The lights flickered brighter, a surge of power coursing through the station's veins. The defense grid crackled to life, energy barriers snapping into place between the crew and their otherworldly attackers. Juno grinned, a fierce satisfaction curling in her chest. "How's that for a curveball, Ragnar?" The Viking paused, eyes narrowing as he assessed the new obstacle. "A fine trick," he acknowledged grudgingly. "But it will not save you." The crew huddled behind their hastily erected defenses, sweat and adrenaline coursing in equal measure. "All right, listen up," Juno said, her voice a low, urgent rasp. "We need to drive them back. If we can stabilize the rift, we might just get out of this alive." "How?" Sirius chimed in, its voice a chipper undercurrent threading through the tension. "I calculate a mere 2% chance of success." "Two's better than zero," Juno shot back, scanning the room for inspiration. "We need a diversion." Bjorn, who had been quietly hacking away at the entities with a vigor that bordered on inappropriate, perked up. "I could challenge their leader," he suggested, hefting his axe with a gleam in his eye. "Not the worst idea," Juno mused, considering the Vikings' sheer enthusiasm for battle. "And it might buy us some time." Bjorn nodded, stepping forward with a lack of hesitation that bordered on reckless. "Ragnar Bloodaxe," he boomed, his voice cutting through the noise like a well-aimed axe. "Face me in single combat if you dare." Ragnar turned, his gaze falling on Bjorn with an appraising stare. A challenge, he rumbled, amusement flickering across his brutish features. Very well, I accept. Juno sighed, torn between admiration for Bjorn's bravado and disbelief at his apparent death wish. All right, she said, gathering the crew close. While they're busy trying to kill each other, we get to work. The station's control room was a mess of tangled wires and sparking consoles, the air heavy with the scent of overheated circuits and impending disaster. Hexel moved with frantic precision, fingers flying over the controls like a pianist on speed. Can you get us more power? Juno asked, glancing nervously at the rift, its edges still seething with latent energy. I can try, Hexel replied, teeth clenched as he worked, but we're running on fumes here. I'm aware, Juno said, scanning the room until her eyes settled on Hiroshi, his katana gleaming in the dim light. Hiroshi, how are you with electronics? Hiroshi shrugged, a wry smile pulling at his lips. Better with a blade, but I'll manage. Good, you're on backup, Juno instructed, turning her attention back to the chaotic scene unfolding outside the safety of their defense grid. Bjorn and Ragnar clashed with a thunderous crash, their weapons biting into each other with a ferocity that would have made even the most hardened warriors flinch. They circled, trading blows and insults with equal vigor. The longer they fight, the better, Hexel muttered, fingers flying over the controls. If we can channel enough power, then maybe we can stabilize the rift, Juno finished, her mind racing with possibilities. Sirius, can you give us a status update? The rift's stability is fluctuating, Sirius reported, its voice unperturbed by the maelstrom. However, if we can maintain sufficient energy output, there's a chance of achieving temporary stabilization. Juno snorted, shaking her head. Well, isn't that just the best news I've heard all day? Outside, the duel raged on, Bjorn and Ragnar locked in a brutal dance of death. The crew watched with bated breath, each clash of steel a reminder of the stakes. Come on, you bloody bastard, Juno murmured under her breath, willing Bjorn to hold his own. Just a little longer. As the fight dragged on, Hexel let out a triumphant whoop. I've got it, more power's coming online. Perfect, Juno said, her attention snapping back to the task at hand. Let's stabilize that rift, people. Hexel and Hiroshi worked in tandem, manipulating the controls with the precision of men who knew the cost of failure. The station shuddered, energy coursing through its veins like a lifeline. Here goes nothing, Juno muttered, fingers crossed metaphorically and literally. The rift pulsed, its chaotic energies swirling into a semblance of order. For a brief shining moment, it seemed as if they might actually succeed, and then, of course, things went sideways. The station shuddered violently, a low groan echoing through its metal bones as the rift bucked against their efforts. Alarms blared anew, a klaxon of impending doom that set Juno's teeth on edge. Sirius, report, Juno barked, desperation creeping into her voice. The rift's energy is destabilizing again, Sirius replied, the calm in its tone almost maddening. We may not be able to maintain this level of output. Great, Juno muttered, frustration bubbling over. Just what we needed. Out in the corridor, the duel between Bjorn and Ragnar was reaching a fever pitch, each man driven by the kind of determination that only came from having nothing left to lose. We need a new plan, Juno said, her mind racing as she watched the rift's energies begin to unravel once more. Something big, Hexel grimaced, glancing at the station's dwindling power reserves. We're tapped out, Juno. There's nothing left. Juno felt a pang of despair, the weight of their situation pressing down like a leaden cloud. And yet, in the depths of that darkness, a spark of ingenuity flickered to life. Then we'll use the rift itself, she said, the idea crystallizing in her mind like a revelation. If we can reverse the flow, send the energy back into the rift, it might just implode on itself, Hexel finished, catching on. That's insane. Insane but possible, Juno insisted, determination hardening her resolve. It's our best shot, Hiroshi nodded, a grim smile tugging at his lips. Then let's get to work. With renewed focus, the crew set about configuring the station's systems to execute their desperate gambit. It was a reckless, dangerous plan, but in the face of certain doom, reckless was all they had left. As they worked, Juno cast a final glance at the battle raging outside their defenses. Bjorn and Ragnar were locked in a deadly embrace, each determined to outlast the other. All right, people, Juno called, her voice a rallying cry against the chaos. This is it. Let's give these bastards a run for their money. The station shuddered anew, the rift's energies reaching a fever pitch as the crew initiated their plan. The air crackled with anticipation, a tension so palpable it was almost a physical force. And then, with a roar that seemed to shake the very fabric of reality, the rift began to collapse in on itself, a swirling vortex of chaos and destruction. Juno held her breath, heart pounding in her chest as she watched their gamble unfold. It was a high-stakes game, and the only certainty was uncertainty itself. As the rift imploded, the entities disappeared in a flash of light, leaving behind only silence and the lingering taste of adrenaline. For a moment, Juno couldn't quite believe it. Against all odds, they'd done it. they'd survived. Well, I'll be damned, Hexel muttered, a note of awe in his voice. Juno let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. Don't count your chickens, she said, a wry smile tugging at her lips. There's still the Viking problem. The crew turned to where Bjorn and Ragnar were still grappling, oblivious to the chaos that had just unfolded. With a final, decisive blow, Bjorn struck Ragnar down, the Viking warrior collapsing with a heavy thud. Silence reigned, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing and the distant hum of machinery. Well, Juno said, surveying the scene with a mix of relief and disbelief. That was something, Bjorn grinned, raising his axe in triumph. A worthy foe, he declared, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of victory. Yeah, and a hell of a cleanup, Hexel added, already envisioning the repairs that lay ahead. As the crew began to pick up the pieces, Juno allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Against all odds, they'd survived yet another day in a universe that seemed hell-bent on destruction. What's next? Marcus asked, his voice a curious mix of exhaustion and determination. Juno chuckled, shaking her head. Who knows, but whatever it is, we'll face it together. And in that moment, as unlikely allies in an uncertain galaxy, it was enough. The Eclipse groaned like a wounded beast, every creak and rattle a reminder that the old girl was hanging on by a thread. Juno Estrada leaned against the console, her eyes scanning the readouts with a practiced resignation. The rift was closed for now, but their problems were far from over. Sirius's voice crackled through the intercom, as chipper as ever, because why shouldn't the AI be happy when everything was going to hell? Congratulations, Captain, you've managed to avert immediate destruction. Probability of station collapse remains at 98%, Juno sighed. Thanks, Sirius. Always a pleasure hearing how doomed we are. Hexel Voss wiped sweat from his brow, glancing at the flickering lights. So what now, Cap? We just wait for the station to implode in on itself, or do you have another miracle up your sleeve? Juno considered her options, which were slim to none. Maybe we try a new strategy, one that doesn't involve blowing ourselves up. Marcus, the Roman with a gladius in one hand and almost childish enthusiasm in the other, chimed in. There's always the option of a glorious last stand. Better to die on your feet than live on your knees. Sure, Marcus, Juno replied. Problem is, in space, dying on your feet just means floating away with a bad case of freezer burn. Sir Reginald, the knight with armor more dented than a car in a demolition derby, nodded solemnly. A noble death is still a death. I'd prefer to keep my head attached if it's all the same to you. Juno turned to Sirius, a thought forming in the back of her mind. Sirius, what's the probability of survival if we stop thinking like idiots and start playing smart? Calculating, Sirius replied, a digital hum accompanying its processing. Probability increases to 20% if we ally with the warriors from the rift. Ally with them. Hexel's incredulous tone was almost lost amid the station's rattling. We just got done trying not to get diced into a history lesson. Yes, Sirius confirmed. However, analysis suggests that their knowledge of combat could bolster our defenses if they can be persuaded to cooperate. Juno rubbed her temples. You're suggesting we make friends with the guys who were just trying to kill us. More like frenemies, Sirius replied. Our goals align, survival. Hiroshi, leaning casually with his katana at the ready, chuckled. Seems risky, but then again, what isn't around here? Juno weighed the pros and cons, which mostly consisted of various shades of disaster. All right, let's say we try this harebrained scheme. How exactly do we go about convincing a bunch of bloodthirsty warriors to join the Let's Not Die Today club? Simple, Sirius said, matter-of-factly. Offer them something they want. And what's that? Juno asked, exasperation creeping in. Honor, glory, and the chance to not get obliterated, Sirius replied. Plus, they get to fight real enemies instead of each other. Bjorn, now nursing a few bruises from his tussle with Ragnar, grinned. I like the sound of that. Nothing like shared adversity to bring people together. We could always promise a rematch later. Promises as stable as the station itself, Hexel muttered, but his hands were already back on the controls, trying to squeeze every drop of functionality out of the failing systems. Juno sighed, a sound that was beginning to feel like her default state. Okay, folks, let's see if we can't charm our way into an alliance. Worst case scenario, we die, and I'm getting real tired of saying that. With a nod to Sirius, Juno took a deep breath and activated the intercom. Attention, ancient warriors of the rift. This is Captain Juno Estrada of the Eclipse. We're all stuck in this cosmic mess together, so how about we stop the fighting and have a little chat? There was a long silence, filled only with the station's groaning protests, before a gravelly voice, Ragnar Bloodix's no doubt, replied. Speak, Captain, but know that we do not parley from fear. Juno smirked, though there was no humor in it. I'm not asking you to. I'm suggesting we fight together. This tin can is about to collapse, and we could use all the help we can get. You help us and we'll help you. Ragnar's response was as cautious as a Viking could manage. What do you offer in return? We are warriors, not mercenaries. How about survival? Juno retorted, and the chance to face a foe other than each other. Come to think of it, there's a whole galaxy of battles out there just waiting for you. Bjorn let out a hearty chuckle. That's the spirit. Nothing like fresh enemies to keep a man sharp. There was a pause, followed by the sound of metal scraping over metal, a sound that could either foretell doom or the start of a beautiful, albeit violent, friendship. You have our attention, Captain. Marcus leaned in closer to Juno, whispering conspiratorially. What's the plan if they say no? Juno shrugged. Then we're screwed, and not in the fun way. Sir Reginald cleared his throat, a sound akin to a cement mixer full of gravel. Perhaps we should appeal to their sense of duty, their code. Even warriors have codes, do they not? Juno nodded. Worth a shot. Sirius, keep the channel open. Let's see if we can't turn this little chat into a full-blown ceasefire. Sirius obliged, the intercom crackling back to life. Warriors of the Rift, we propose an alliance based on mutual benefit. Fight alongside us, and we'll ensure your survival as best we can. Ragnar's voice was thoughtful, considering. And if we decline, we'll die, Juno replied bluntly. Along with you. And frankly, between the cold void and getting cozy with the wrong end of a gladius, I'd prefer neither. There was a murmur of voices, a council of warlords deliberating on the edge of a dying star. Juno could almost picture them, clad in their anachronistic armor, grinning with the same reckless abandon that had brought them through the rift in the first place. Finally, Ragnar spoke again, his voice carrying a grudging respect. Very well, Captain, we will aid you for now, but know this, our trust is hard-earned and harder kept. Juno's relief was palpable, though tempered by the knowledge that they'd just embarked on a path paved with uncertainty. Understood, let's not make any promises we can't keep. As the warriors emerged from the gloom of the station's corridors, Juno's motley crew tensed, hands hovering near weapons, eyes wary. It was a delicate dance, this alliance, like juggling knives while blindfolded. Bjorn stepped forward, his grin as wide as the rift that had brought these warriors. Looks like we've got ourselves a party. Welcome to the madhouse. Marcus chuckled, his gladius twirling idly. A house of madness indeed, yet even this chaos may be harnessed. Sir Reginald clanked his way to the front, offering Ragnar a knightly nod. We shall stand together against the coming storm. Ragnar surveyed them all with a keen eye, nodding at last. Aye, together we may yet see the dawn. Juno watched these strange bedfellows, her heart a mix of dread and hope. This was their last chance, and failure wasn't an option she was willing to entertain. Not yet. All right, everyone, Juno said, her voice firm, cutting through the tension like a blade. We've got a station to save, and not a lot of time to do it. Hexel, Hiroshi, get those systems running. Marcus, Sir Reginald, keep an eye out for any more surprises. Bjorn, Ragnar, get your people ready. The crew moved with newfound purpose, the warriors from the rift blending into their ranks like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that didn't quite fit but would have to do. Hexel was already knee-deep in wires and circuits, muttering to himself about the absurdity of their situation. If anyone ever writes a song about this, they'd better not call it a ballad of bravery, more like the boondoggle of the century. Hiroshi nodded, his katana sheathed as he focused on rerouting power. If we pull this off, we'll be legends. Or at least footnotes in the history of not dying. With the station's power reserves dwindling faster than a gambler's savings, they worked tirelessly, each second ticking away like a bomb counting down. It was a race against time, against fate, and against the universe's own perverse sense of humor. Juno watched as the makeshift alliance took shape, the warriors and her crew working side by side with a camaraderie born of necessity. It was a fragile bond, but it was all they had. Sirius's voice, ever the optimist, piped up once more. Estimated time to stabilization, unknown. Probability of success has increased to 25%. Juno snorted, a sound that was half laugh, half sob. 25. I'll take it, let's make those odds count. As they labored, sweat and resolve mingling in the oppressive heat of the failing life support systems, Juno couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. Here they were, a ragtag band of misfits and warriors from history's scrap heap, fighting for survival on the edge of oblivion. And yet, despite the odds, despite the insanity of it all, there was something undeniably right about it, as if this was where they were meant to be in this moment, in this fight. All right, people, Juno called, her voice echoing through the corridors, carrying with it the weight of their shared fate. Let's show this damn universe what we're made of. With renewed vigor, they pressed on, every action, every choice driven by the singular goal of survival. And as the station trembled around them, Juno couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Because sometimes, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, humanity still found a way to shine. Hexel was elbow-deep in a tangle of wires that looked like a toddler's attempt at abstract art, with the added danger of electrocution. His fingers danced over the conduits like a pianist on speed. I've got it, he announced triumphantly, pulling back with a singed finger. We can stabilize the rift using the star's energy. Juno squinted at him like he'd just proposed marrying a black hole. And how exactly do we do that without turning into cosmic toast? Hexel grinned, the kind of grin that suggested he hadn't thought that far ahead. We reroute power from the failing systems directly into the rift stabilizers. Use the star's energy as a buffer. Juno rubbed her chin, which was getting a workout today from all her thinking. And you're sure this won't just hasten our inevitable demise? Hexel shrugged. About as sure as I'd be betting on a duck in a horse race. We've got about a 25% chance of success, according to Sirius. Sirius chimed in from the intercom, sounding far too chipper given the circumstances. Correct, Hexel. 25% is better than our current trajectory, which is imminent obliteration. Great, Juno said deadpan. From certain death to probably dead. I've never felt more alive. Marcus, ever the optimist, or perhaps just missing a few screws, clapped a hand on Hexel's shoulder. Hope springs eternal, even if we're planting it in a garden of doom. Bjorn, leaning against a bulkhead with the casual ease of a man who'd rather be anywhere else, nodded. Aye, and if it fails, at least we'll go out with a bang worth singing about. Ragnar, ever the harbinger of reality, crossed his arms. We will need the cooperation of my warriors. They know the power of harnessing the elements. Juno nodded. We're going to need a hell of a motivational speech, and maybe some duct tape. Just in case, assembling the warriors was a bit like herding cats, except the cats were armed and had a penchant for violence. Still, they gathered, a ragtag assembly of misplaced historical figures and modern-day desperados. Juno stood before them, feeling as out of place as a philosopher at a mosh pit. All right, listen up, she barked, hoping volume would compensate for a lack of clear leadership qualities. We need to work together to stabilize the rift. Use the star's energy to save this crumbling heap. Ragnar stepped forward, his presence demanding attention like a fire alarm in a library. And how do we contribute to such a task, Captain? You provide the muscle while we provide the tech, Juno replied, channeling every coach from every bad sports movie. You've seen the rift, you know its power. Use that knowledge to guide us. Sir Reginald, hitting his stride as the diplomatic representative of armored anachronisms, added, we stand to gain much and lose only the chains of chaos. Let us forge a new tale, one of survival. Ragnar nodded, his expression a blend of skepticism and reluctant acceptance. Very well, we shall aid you. But know that our patience is as thin as your air supply. As they set to work, the station's atmosphere shifted from impending doom to a kind of grim determination. The warriors, accustomed to the chaos of battle, found a strange sense of purpose in the task at hand. Hexel manned the control panel, barking orders like a general with a caffeine addiction. Reroute power from the auxiliary subsystems. And someone keep an eye on those coolant levels, or we'll be calling this place the hot tin can. The warriors, with Ragnar at the helm, followed his instructions with surprising efficiency, their hands steady on tools and makeshift weapons. It was as if centuries of warfare had prepared them for this moment, a battle not of flesh and blood, but of wires and circuits. Juno moved among them, offering the kind of leadership that involved equal parts shouting and praying under her breath. Keep it together, people. This ain't the time to go rogue, she hollered, watching as Bjorn and Marcus worked alongside Hiroshi, a trio of anachronistic chaos. Hiroshi, ever the samurai, sheathed his katana with a flourish. Perhaps our greatest victory will be not against a foe, but against the universe itself. Or just not dying, Hexel grunted, fingers flying over the control panel as if he were playing a particularly tense game of whack-a-mole. That'd be a win in my book. The station shuddered, a reminder that time was not on their side. The rift pulsed ominously, a gaping maw ready to consume them all. Hexel's plan was bold, some might say reckless, but it was the only hand they had to play. With the warriors fully integrated into the crew's operations, the station felt alive with activity. The systems hummed with the promise of power, and for once, the ambient noise was more than just creaking metal and distant screams of failing machinery. All right, Hexel, Juno called, eyes fixed on the readouts that might as well have been ancient runes for all she understood. Say the magic words. Hexel took a deep breath, fingers poised over the final sequence of commands. All right, everyone, hold onto your butts. Initiating power transfer now. The station thrummed with energy, a surge that felt like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The lights flickered, the air hummed, and for a moment it seemed as if the universe held its breath. In the control room, the tension was palpable, a silent scream of anticipation. The warriors stood ready, their weapons forgotten in the face of this new kind of battle. Juno watched the readouts, willing them not to betray her. Then, with a shuddering sigh, the system stabilized. The rift, that cosmic gash in the fabric of reality, began to calm, its edges smoothing into something less terrifying, more manageable. Hexel whooped, his voice cracking with relief. We did it. By the stars, we actually did it. Sirius piped up, ever the bearer of dry wit. Probability of immediate collapse has decreased significantly. Current stability is holding at 70%. Juno let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Well, that's the best news I've heard since breakfast. Ragnar approached, his expression a mix of triumph and the knowledge that this was only the beginning. You have our thanks, Captain. This battle, at least, is won. Sir Reginald offered a gallant bow, though his armor creaked in protest. And so we stand, united by fate and the whims of a cruel universe. Bjorn clapped a hand on Marcus's shoulder, the two of them sharing a moment of camaraderie. And who'd have thought our greatest enemy would be the cold, unfeeling cosmos? Marcus grinned, his enthusiasm undimmed. Fate brings strange allies. What tales we shall tell. Juno allowed herself a small smile, though it was tempered by the knowledge that they were far from safe. All right, folks, we've got breathing room, but we're not out of the woods yet, she said, turning her attention to the repaired systems. Let's keep it together and see if we can't get this old heap moving in the right direction. The crew, buoyed by their success, returned to their tasks with a renewed sense of purpose. The station, once a cacophony of despair and malfunction, now thrummed with the energy of possibility. As they worked, Juno couldn't shake the feeling that, despite the odds, they had managed to pull off something remarkable. In the face of certain doom, they had found the strength to fight back, to adapt, to survive. And as the warriors from the Rift learned to navigate the strange new world of circuitry and Starship Command, Juno couldn't help but marvel at the strange tapestry of fate that had brought them all together. It was a moment of grace in a universe that seemed hell-bent on their destruction, a fleeting victory in a war that was far from over. But for now, it was enough. All right, everyone, Juno announced, surveying the controlled chaos with a mix of pride and exhaustion. Let's keep this thing from falling apart for a little while longer, shall we? With renewed vigor and a newfound sense of unity, the crew of the Eclipse pressed on, ready to face whatever challenges the universe decided to throw their way next. Because in this dark and unforgiving galaxy, one thing was clear: humanity wasn't done fighting yet. The Eclipse, already a hodgepodge of archaic warriors and weary spacefarers, was now a circus in full swing, with Juno as the reluctant ringmaster. The station shook with the rhythm of desperation, chaos swirling around like a storm with its eye set on a singular, impossibly dangerous task. And yet, against all odds, the ragtag crew and their anachronistic allies found themselves working toward a common goal: stabilizing the rift. All right, everyone, Juno's voice cut through the cacophony like a knife through synthetic butter. Time to make history, or more likely, turn into history. Ragnar, towering like a mountain that had decided to try its hand at space travel, nodded gravely. Let us harness the power of the stars, as our ancestors once did. Hexel, never one to miss a chance at snide commentary, quipped, yeah, except this time we'll use computers instead of human sacrifices. Progress right, the warriors, accustomed to the cut and thrust of physical combat, found themselves in a strange new battlefield of wires, screens, and blinking lights. It was as foreign to them as a bathhouse to a barbarian, yet they approached it with the same grim determination that had seen them through countless battles. Here's the plan, Juno announced over the din, her voice carrying with the authority of someone who had decided to embrace their fate, even if it was with a wry smile. Sirius and Ragnar will lead a team to the star's core. We need to tap into its energy and channel it through the stabilizers. Marcus, ever the optimist or perhaps just blissfully naive, raised his hand. And how exactly do we plan to get there without getting fried like a cheap circuit board? Sirius's voice crackled through the intercom, a digital ghost in the machine. I have calculated a trajectory that maximizes survivability. Though it should be noted, the probability of success remains challenging. Challenging, Bjorn echoed with a snort. That's one way to put it, like calling Ragnarok a minor inconvenience. Sir Reginald, adjusting his armor with a series of metallic clanks, muttered, I'd rather face a horde of dragons than fiddle with these infernal contraptions. Ragnar, stoic and resolute, simply nodded. We do what must be done. The alternative is far less appealing. As plans went, it was less of a blueprint and more of a desperate sketch on a napkin, but it was all they had. Sirius, ever the optimist of binary logic, had calculated the odds, not that anyone found comfort in numbers with so many zeros after the decimal point. The team assembled, a motley crew of seasoned warriors and jaded spacefarers, each bringing their own unique brand of skills and snark to the table. Ragnar, his very presence lending weight to the endeavor, took point alongside Sirius, whose projections and calculations formed the backbone of their audacious plan. Juno watched them go, a strange cocktail of hope and dread swirling in her chest. Well, folks, this is it. Time to see if we can pull off the impossible or just become another cautionary tale. Hexel, faced with the daunting task of keeping everything running while their best hope ventured into the star's fiery embrace, grumbled under his breath. Just remember, if this goes sideways, I'm blaming all of you. The Eclipse shuddered again, a reminder that their time was as limited as their air supply. The rift loomed ominously, a gaping wound in spacetime that threatened to swallow them whole if they didn't stitch it up fast. As Sirius and Ragnar led the charge towards the heart of the dying star, the rest of the crew worked tirelessly to keep the station from collapsing under the strain. Wires sparked, consoles blinked, and the air hummed with the frantic energy of desperate resolve. Hiroshi, ever the calm amid chaos, took a moment to check on Juno. "Captain, your orders. Just keep us in one piece, Hiroshi," Juno replied, her eyes never leaving the monitors. "And maybe say a prayer to whatever gods are listening for those brave idiots out there." The journey to the star's core was a suicide mission wrapped in a miracle, with a side of improbable odds. Yet Ragnar and his team faced it like they had every other battle, with swords drawn and shields raised, even if this time the swords were made of science and the shields were equations. In the heart of the star, where temperatures soared and radiation threatened to turn flesh to ash, Sirius's cold calculations guided them through the inferno. Ragnar, tempered by countless wars, stood poised and unflinching, his warrior spirit unbroken even in the face of cosmic fury. "By Odin's beard," Ragnar breathed, his voice crackling over the comms, "this is truly a sight to behold." Sirius responded, his tone as dry as the vacuum of space. "Yes, quite the marvel. Now if we could focus on the task at hand rather than the view, we might live to tell the tale." Back on the Eclipse, the crew held their collective breath, waiting for any sign that their friends had succeeded. The rift's oscillations slowed, its chaotic edges starting to stabilize, a testament to the incredible gamble they'd undertaken. In the control room, Hexel's fingers danced over the keys, each stroke a prayer to the digital deities. "Come on, you beautiful bastard," he muttered to the stabilizer console. "Do your thing." As the seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness, Juno felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her like the gravity of a collapsing star. "Sirius, report," she demanded, her voice edged with a tension she couldn't quite hide. Sirius's voice echoed back, tinged with something that might have been optimism. "Initial readings are promising. The star's energy is stabilizing the rift." Ragnar's voice, a deep rumble of satisfaction, followed. "It is done. The power of the star flows as it should." The cheer that erupted from the crew was as much relief as it was jubilation. They'd done it against all odds. They'd managed to wrest some semblance of control from the chaos. Juno allowed herself a moment to breathe, to let the adrenaline seep from her bones. "Good work, everyone. Now let's get them back in one piece." The journey back from the star's core was fraught with its own dangers, but compared to what they'd just accomplished, it felt almost routine. The station, once a patchwork of despair and malfunction, now thrummed with the energy of hard-won stability. As Ragnar and Sirius returned, they were met with cheers and backslaps, even from the most stoic of warriors. Sir Reginald, ever the gentleman, offered a flourishing bow. "Bravo, my friends. Performance worthy of the greatest ballads." Bjorn, ever the pragmatist, clapped Ragnar on the back with enough force to rattle his armor. "Aye, not bad for a bunch of misfit toys." Marcus, grinning from ear to ear, added, "See, hope springs eternal, even in the darkest corners of the universe." Juno, watching her crew celebrate their improbable victory, felt a swell of something dangerously close to pride. "All right, folks," she called, clapping her hands to get their attention. "We've bought ourselves some time, but let's not get cocky. We're not out of this yet." The warriors, their purpose fulfilled and their pact honored, began to fade, called back to their own reality by the closing rift. Ragnar turned to Juno, a solemn promise in his gaze. "You have our gratitude, Captain. This alliance will not be forgotten." Juno nodded, her expression softer than usual. "Likewise, good luck out there in whatever time you call home." As the last of the warriors disappeared, the rift sealed shut behind them, leaving the silence of space in its wake. The station, no longer beset by the chaotic energies of the rift, felt almost peaceful, if one could call a barely functioning tin can in orbit around a dying star peaceful. Sirius's voice, calm and reassuring, piped up from the intercom. "Rift stabilizers holding. Probability of catastrophic failure now reduced to negligible levels." Hexel slumped back in his chair, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "Well, that's a relief. I was getting tired of planning my funeral." Juno allowed herself a wry smile, the kind that said she'd just cheated death and wasn't quite sure if she should be proud or terrified. "All right, team. Let's get this heap shipshape and figure out where we go from here." As the crew set to work, buoyed by their unexpected success, Juno couldn't help but marvel at what they'd accomplished. Against all odds, they'd pulled themselves back from the brink, proving that even in the darkest of times, humanity and a handful of mythical warriors could find a way to fight back. It wasn't a perfect victory, nor was it a clean one, but it was a victory all the same. And in the grimdark expanse of space, where everything seemed set against them, that was more than enough. As the eclipse continued its orbit around the dying star, its crew found a renewed sense of purpose, a shared understanding that they could face whatever challenges the universe decided to throw their way next. And in the cold, uncaring vastness of space, that small spark of hope burned bright, a beacon in the darkness, a testament to their resilience. "All right, everyone," Juno called, her voice carrying with the weight of hard-won experience. "Let's keep this tin can flying and see what the universe has in store for us next." And with that, the crew of the Eclipse returned to their stations, ready to face whatever came next with sarcasm, grit, and a whole lot of duct tape. After all, in a universe determined to destroy them, they were determined to survive, come what may. The Eclipse was breathing again, if you could call the erratic wheezing of crumbling systems breathing. But hey, it wasn't exploding, which in Juno Estra's book was a marked improvement. After the monumental chaos of stabilizing a rift using the core of a dying star, anything less than catastrophic felt like a win. She leaned back in her chair in the command room, the creaks echoing the groans of the station around her. "Feels like we've just survived a cosmic blender set to puree," Juno muttered, running a hand through her hair, already weighed down by space grease and worry. Hexel, still hunched over a panel, grunted in agreement. "Next time, let's try a plan that doesn't involve imminent death." "My heart's had enough cardio for one lifetime," Sirius piped in through the intercom, his voice smooth and calculated as ever, yet tinged with a hint of digital pride. "I must commend the crew on their resilience. According to my records, the probability of survival was considerably lower than zero. Always the optimist, Sirius," Juno snorted, though there was a warmth to her sarcasm. "If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were starting to like us mere mortals. I find that improbable," Sirius replied evenly, "but I must admit, watching you defy statistical logic is fascinating." Bjorn sauntered in, a triumphantly self-satisfied grin plastered on his face. "Just another day at the office, right?" "I've had worse hangovers than that mission." Marcus, ever the fountain of misguided optimism, chimed in. "We did it, though. We're still here against all the odds." "There weren't just odds, Marcus. There was a whole damn betting pool, and we were the long shot," Juno said with a weary chuckle. "But yeah, we did it." Somehow, Ragnar stood nearby, a silent sentinel of muscle and resolve, nodding in agreement. His mere presence suggested that they had done more than just survive. They had accomplished something extraordinary. The big guy was a walking motivational poster for never giving up, even if he did look like he could bench press a small moon. The station, now eerily quiet, no longer felt like it was on the verge of disintegration. Instead, it hummed with the low buzz of systems slowly coming back online, an orchestra of mechanical life clawing its way back from the brink. The screens blipped with less static now, and every successful reboot felt like a small victory in itself. Sir Reginald, adjusting the dented pieces of his armor, approached Juno with a theatrical flourish. "We've bested the beast once more, my lady. I dare say our tale will echo through the ages. Yeah, until the next crisis knocks on our airlock," Juno replied, though she couldn't help but smirk at the knight's unwavering dramatics. She admired his ability to spin heroics out of sheer survival. Hiroshi, ever the silent operator, slid a maintenance report across the console to Juno. He didn't need words. The sheer volume of red marks told the story. The Eclipse needed repairs, a lot of them. But what else was new? "I'll get started on these," Hiroshi said, the understatement of a lifetime. "Add it to my to-do list, right below don't die priorities, Hiroshi. Sometimes you have to juggle them," Juno replied, shaking her head. She rose from her seat, stretching her back until it gave a satisfying pop. "All right, let's see about putting this beast back together." As the crew dispersed to their various repair duties, Juno took a moment to reflect on the events. They'd faced a cosmic anomaly head-on, dealt with mythical warriors popping out of nowhere, and made it out alive. She couldn't decide if she should be proud or worried that they were becoming so adept at averting disaster. She found herself at the viewport, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The dying star, now somewhat stable, burned with a haunting beauty. It was a reminder of the fine line they walked between life and the cold embrace of the void. Yet here they were, still standing. Well, floating more like, but semantics. Sirius interrupted her thoughts, his voice softer, more personal somehow. "Captain Estra, it appears your leadership has once again defied expectations." "Yeah, and it only took a few near-death experiences," Juno replied, though there was no real bite to her words. "We've got a good crew, Sirius. A ragtag bunch of misfits, but damn if they don't pull through when it counts." "Indeed," Sirius agreed. "The crew of the Eclipse has proven." "Resourceful, that's one way to put it." Juno let out a slow breath, feeling the tension ease from her shoulders. "We'll fix this place up. We always do." Hexel, passing by with a toolkit, overheard and grinned. "And if not, we can always turn it into a really depressing tourist attraction." Juno chuckled, the absurdity of the situation not lost on her. Welcome to the Eclipse, the galaxy's most dysfunctional haunted house. They worked in tandem, crew members moving like the cogs of a well-oiled, if slightly battered, machine. Hiroshi coordinated the repairs, his calm demeanor inspiring confidence even when faced with seemingly insurmountable tasks. Bjorn tackled the heavy lifting, using brute force where finesse failed. Marcus, with his relentless positivity, kept spirits high, even if at times his cheerfulness was met with groans and eye rolls. Sirius continued to monitor the systems, his digital presence a constant reassurance. Though he was a product of programming, there was something oddly comforting about his presence. Maybe it was his dry wit, or maybe it was just that he hadn't tried to kill them, yet. As the day wore on, Juno watched her crew pull together, each taking on tasks with determination. The station was still far from being a five-star resort, but it was getting there. Repair by repair, they were turning the Eclipse from a death trap back into a somewhat functional home. The odds were against us, Bjorn reflected, taking a break and grabbing a drink from the rations. But when aren't they? The universe just loves to keep us humble, Hexel quipped, tightening a bolt here and there, or it hates us. I'm not sure which, but it's definitely one of those. Who cares? Marcus said, his optimism annoyingly unyielding. We're still here. That's gotta count for something, right? Juno watched their banter, feeling a rare warmth spread through her chest. They were a mismatched crew in a rust bucket of a station, but they were hers. And damn if they didn't make the impossible seem almost routine. As the repairs continued, Juno drifted over to the main console, where Sirius's soft glow radiated from the screens. Hey, Sirius, I've been thinking troubling thought, Sirius replied. You thinking that is? Juno grinned. Thanks for the vote of confidence. But seriously, I wanted to say thanks. You've been, well, part of the crew, acknowledged, Sirius said, a hint of what could have been amusement in his tone. Though I must point out that I am literally wired to do so, yeah, but you do it well, Juno said, patting the console as if it were Sirius's shoulder. We'd be a flaming wreck without you, metaphorically and literally, Sirius added. As the station hummed back to life, slowly but surely, the crew began to regroup, gathering their collective breath. Repairs were still ongoing, and the threat of future crises loomed always on the horizon, but for now there was a calmness, a quiet solidarity that hadn't existed before. Juno took a moment to appreciate it. In the aftermath of chaos, they'd found something precious, a deeper bond, forged in the fires of crisis, bound by shared experience and mutual respect. It wasn't just survival, it was growth. The Eclipse was more than just a station, it was home, and in the infinite darkness of space, surrounded by chaos and uncertainty, that meant everything. All right, team, Juno called out, drawing her crew's attention. We've got a lot of work ahead, but let's make this place ours again. Whatever comes next, we're ready. The crew responded with a collective murmur of agreement, a unified chorus of resolve. They might have been knocked down, but they weren't out, not by a long shot. As they turned back to their tasks, the station's systems whirring to life around them, Juno couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. The universe might be a cold, uncaring expanse, but here within the battered walls of the Eclipse, they'd found their own little corner of it, a place where they could fight back, survive, and just maybe thrive. They'd faced the storm, emerged stronger for it, and now, with their battered station coming back together piece by piece, they were ready for whatever came next. In the end, they'd done more than just avoid disaster. They'd found resilience, camaraderie, and a renewed sense of purpose. That alone was a victory worth celebrating, and in the grimdark expanse of space, where every new dawn was a small miracle, that was more than enough. Juno took one last look at her crew, her family, and nodded to herself. Let's keep this tin can flying. Whatever happens next, we're not going down without a fight. And with that, the crew of the Eclipse returned to their stations, ready to face the universe with a little more grit, a lot more humor, and an undeniable spirit of defiance. After all, in a universe determined to bring them to their knees, they were determined to stand tall, come what may.